Logan Pierce grabbed the woman's arm before she hit the marble floor, a complete stranger, a billionaire, CEO, dead drunk in a ballroom full of people who pretended not to see her falling. He didn't know her name. He didn't know what she was worth. All he knew was that nobody else was moving. That one split-second decision made by a man who had nothing was about to change everything. What happened next morning? Nobody saw it coming. Not her board of directors. Not the press. Not even Logan himself. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss where this goes. The Arcadia Hotel was the kind of place that made a man feel the exact size of his bank account. Logan Pierce felt it the second he walked through the front doors. The weight of marble floors, the height of chandeliers that cost more than his truck, the low murmur of conversations happening in a language he technically spoke but had never really learned. The language of old money and older power. He tugged at the collar of his rented suit and reminded himself why he was here. Marcus Webb, his former commanding officer. The man who'd pulled him out of a burning vehicle outside of Fallujah in 2004 and never once let him forget it, not in a bragging way, but in the quiet, steady way that good men carry the weight of each other. Marcus had called him 3 weeks ago. "They're honoring me at this thing, Logan. Black tie. I need a familiar face in the room, or I'm going to lose my mind." So here Logan was. Familiar face. Unfamiliar world. He spotted Marcus near the bar, already working the room with the kind of easy confidence that came from 30 years of telling men what to do and having them actually do it. Marcus saw him, grinned, waved him over. "You look like you'd rather be defusing an IED, Marcus said, shaking his hand. "I'd be more comfortable," Logan said honestly. Marcus laughed and handed him a glass of something that probably cost $40 and tasted like expensive dirt. Logan held it more than he drank it. He wasn't much of a drinker anymore. Hadn't been since Mia was born. Single fathers didn't get the luxury of off switches. He thought about Mia right then, 9 years old, probably asleep by now, at his neighbor Mrs. Callahan's place, her stuffed elephant tucked under her arm, the way she'd been doing since she was 2. He'd promised her he'd be home by midnight. He checked his watch. 8:47 p.m. Plenty of time. He let Marcus drag him around for an hour. Handshake, small talk, the occasional war story that made the civilians go wide-eyed. Logan smiled when he was supposed to, nodded when it was appropriate, and spent a lot of time studying the room the way he'd always studied rooms. Old habit. You learn to read spaces fast when spaces can kill you. That's when he noticed her. Not because she was beautiful, though she was. Not because of the emerald dress or the way the room seemed to part around her like water. He noticed her because something was wrong. He'd seen it in other soldiers. The controlled collapse. The way a person holds themselves together so precisely with such deliberate effort that the effort itself becomes visible to anyone trained to look for it. She was standing near the east wall, champagne flute in hand, her third that he'd counted in the last 40 minutes, though he hadn't been watching her specifically, just cataloging the room the way he always did. She was talking to 2 men in suits who both looked like they were performing the act of listening rather than actually doing it. Her smile was perfect. Her posture was perfect. But her eyes were doing something her smile wasn't. They were sliding. Just slightly. Just enough. "Who's that?" he asked Marcus, tilting his head almost imperceptibly toward her. Marcus glanced over. Isabella Vaughn, CEO of Vaughn Capital. Her father built it. She took it over at 28. She's $24 billion worth of untouchable. Logan. Why? "She's going to go down," Logan said quietly. Marcus frowned. "What?" "In about 10 minutes. He set his glass down on a passing waiter's tray. "She's had too much, and she's fighting it. Hard." Marcus looked again, more carefully this time, then back at Logan. "You sure?" "Yeah." "What are you going to do about it?" Logan thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Then he started walking. He didn't approach her the way a man approaches a beautiful woman at a party. He approached her the way he'd approach a situation that required management calm, direct, without telegraphing alarm to the surrounding environment. The last thing she needed was a scene. He stepped into the orbit of her conversation, naturally nodding at the two suits as if he belonged there. Then turned to her with a neutral expression and said quietly enough that only she could hear. "Ms. Vaughn, there's a call for you. Private line." It was a clean lie. Simple. She blinked at him, those sliding eyes trying to focus, and he saw the moment of confusion, then something else. Recognition. Not of him specifically, but of the lifeline being thrown. "Excuse me, gentlemen," she said, and her voice was steadier than he expected. Trained, disciplined even now. She turned with him, and they walked slowly at a pace she could manage toward the corridor that led away from the main ballroom. He kept a hand hovering near her elbow without touching it. Ready, but not presumptuous. The moment they turned the corner and the noise of the party softened behind them, she stopped walking. "There's no call," she said. "No," he agreed. She stared at him. Up close he could see how hard she was working. Her jaw was tight. Her breathing was controlled, deliberate, the kind of breathing people do when they're trying to hold their world together through sheer mechanical effort. "Who are you?" she asked. "Nobody important," he said. "You need water and somewhere to sit. I need—" She stopped. Her hand came up to the wall, and he moved immediately, one hand going to her elbow, gently, not grabbing, just steadying, and the other to the small of her back. "I've got you," he said. "Don't fall. There are still people who can see this corridor." It was exactly the right thing to say, he realized later. Not "are you okay?" Not "let me help you." The practical instruction. The thing that engaged the disciplined part of her brain that was still functioning. She squared her shoulders, took a breath. "There's a lounge," she said. "Second door on the left. Lead the way. I'm right here." The lounge was empty, small, meant for hotel staff to use between service shifts. There was a couch that had seen better decades, a mini fridge, and a coffee maker. Logan guided her to the couch, and she sat with the careful deliberateness of someone who understood that sitting was a decision point they needed to commit to. He opened the mini fridge. 3 bottles of water. He cracked one open and held it out. She took it without argument. Drank half of it in one go. "I wasn't that bad," she said. Her voice had a faint defensive edge. "You were about 60 seconds from the marble floor," he said. He said it plainly, without judgment, and sat down in the chair across from her rather than beside her, giving her space. "I've seen men twice your size go down faster." She looked at him over the water bottle. "You were military. Navy. Retired. How could you tell?" "About me. The controlled collapse," he said. "The way you hold it together gets visible when it starts to slip. I've watched it happen in combat zones." He paused. "The men in the suits didn't notice because they weren't looking at you. They were looking at your position." Something shifted in her expression. A small crack in the porcelain. "That's—" She stopped, drank more water. "That's an accurate observation." "I'm Logan Pierce," he said. She extended a hand with the automatic reflex of someone who'd shaken 10,000 hands. "Isabella Vaughn." "I know. Of course you do. A beat. Everyone does." He didn't say anything to that. He found a protein bar in his jacket pocket. He always kept one for Mia emergencies, sometimes also himself, and set it on the cushion beside her. "You should eat something." She looked at the protein bar, then at him. Something flickered in her eyes that wasn't quite amusement, and wasn't quite gratitude, but lived somewhere in the complicated territory between them. "You carry protein bars to black tie galas," she said. "I have a 9-year-old daughter," he said. "I carry protein bars everywhere." She picked up the bar, peeled it open, took a small careful bite. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, muffled by the walls, the party continued its performance. "Why did you help me?" she asked, not aggressive, genuinely curious, like the question had been sitting on her tongue and she'd decided somewhat against her better judgment to let it out. He thought about it honestly. Because you needed it and no one else was going to. I have people, she said. Staff. Security. Your staff was probably afraid to embarrass you. Your security was watching the doors. He leaned back in the chair. Nobody in that room was watching you. The actual you. Another crack in the porcelain. This one she seemed to feel because she looked away quickly, pressing her lips together. I should go back, she said. She didn't move. You should drink the rest of that water first, he said. She drank the rest of the water. He walked her back to the elevator 20 minutes later. She was steadier by then, not sober exactly, but controlled the way she clearly preferred to be. In the elevator, she turned to him. I want to give you my card, she said, to thank you. You don't have to do that. I know I don't have to. She reached into her small clutch and pulled out a card that probably had its own net worth. But you were decent. People aren't usually decent to me without an agenda. He took the card, looked at it. Her personal cell was written on the back in actual pen, which he suspected she didn't do often. I'll tell Marcus you said hi, he said. Who's Marcus? My former CO, the man being honored tonight. The reason I'm here. She absorbed that. So you weren't even supposed to be in my orbit tonight? No. The elevator opened on her floor. She stepped out, then turned back. Logan Pierce, she said, like she was filing it somewhere that mattered. Good night, Ms. Vaughn. Isabella, she said, and then the door closed. He found Marcus back at the party, still working the room, and delivered a short, quiet version of events. Marcus listened without interrupting, which was how Marcus had always listened fully without inserting himself. When Logan finished, Marcus said, You know who her father is. I know who she is. Richard Vaughn. Senator. Old Virginia money. The family doesn't mix with people like us, Logan. I didn't mix with her, Logan said. I kept her off the floor. That's what you're telling yourself. That's what happened. Marcus looked at him for a long moment. You took her card. She insisted. Did she write anything on the back? Logan was quiet. Marcus smiled slowly. The smile of a man who had survived 30 years of reading situations accurately. Just be careful, he said. Women like that don't live in the same world we do. I know, Logan said. He drove home at 11:15 with the protein bar wrapper on his passenger seat and her card in his jacket pocket. Mrs. Callahan had Mia sleeping in the guest room. He carried his daughter to the car. She was getting almost too big for this, but not quite, and she murmured against his shoulder without waking. Dad, she said, still mostly asleep. Yeah, Bug, he said. I'm here. Go back to sleep. He drove home through the quiet streets, both hands on the wheel. He told himself the night was finished. A good deed done. A stranger helped. Nothing more. But the card was still in his pocket. And Isabella Vaughn had said his name like she was filing it somewhere that mattered. And Logan Pierce, who had survived Fallujah, and 2 deployments, and the loneliest kind of life a man can build. The kind where he's strong for everyone else and quiet about the rest, had felt for exactly 40 minutes in a staff lounge with a couch that had seen better decades, like someone had actually looked at him. Not the veteran, not the single dad, not the man who couldn't quite fit the rented suit. Just him. He parked in the driveway, sat in the dark for a minute, listened to Mia breathe in the back seat. Then he got out of the car, walked around, lifted his daughter into his arms, and carried her inside. He didn't look at the card again that night, but he didn't throw it away either. The card sat on his kitchen counter for 3 days. Logan walked past it every morning, making Mia's breakfast, packing her lunch, signing her reading log, and every morning he made the same silent decision. Not today. He wasn't sure what today would look like when it finally came, or if it would come at all. He was a practical man. He understood the geometry of the situation without needing anyone to draw it for him. Isabella Vaughn existed in a world so far above his pay grade that the distance wasn't even insulting. It was just a fact. Like gravity. Like the specific ache in his left knee that came every winter since Fallujah. Some things just were what they were. On the fourth morning, his phone rang while he was rinsing Mia's cereal bowl. The number wasn't saved. But he recognized the area code downtown the financial district. He almost let it go to voicemail. Then he picked up. "You didn't call," she said. No greeting, no identification. Just that direct, slightly accusatory, and underneath it something that wasn't quite vulnerability, but was doing its best impression of it. "I didn't think you'd want me to," he said honestly. A beat of silence. "Why not?" "Because people in your position usually feel embarrassed the next day. They want the reminder gone." Another pause, longer this time. He could hear office sounds in the background, keyboards, a distant phone, the specific ambient hum of a place with a lot of money moving through it. "I'm not embarrassed," she said, and then quieter. "I'm grateful. There's a difference." He dried his hands on the dish towel and leaned against the counter. "How are you feeling?" "Like someone replaced my brain with wet concrete, but functional." A short exhale that might have been a laugh. "I had back-to-back board meetings starting at 7 this morning. I'm told I was coherent." "Were you?" "Probably 60% coherent, 40% performance." She paused. "Don't tell anyone." "I don't know anyone to tell." "That's actually one of the things I—" She stopped. Started again differently. "I want to thank you properly. Dinner. This week if you're available." Logan was quiet for a moment. He looked at the spot on the counter where Mia had left a ring of orange juice that he'd been meaning to wipe up since Tuesday. "Ms. Vaughn." "Isabella." "Isabella." He used her name carefully, like testing weight on uncertain ground. "You don't owe me anything. I did what anyone should have done." "You did what no one else did," she corrected. "And I've been in enough negotiations to know the difference between what people should do and what they actually do." Another pause. "Dinner. Nothing formal. I'll text you the address." Before he could answer, she'd already hung up. He stood there for a moment with the phone in his hand. Then he looked at the card on the counter, and then at the orange juice ring, and then he wiped the counter clean and went to wake up his daughter. Maya was having one of her mornings. Not a bad morning exactly. Mia rarely had truly bad mornings. She was resilient in the specific bone-deep way that children of single parents often are, like they understand instinctively that their parent is already carrying something heavy and they shouldn't add to it. But she was quiet over breakfast, picking at her toast, and Logan recognized the quiet because he'd lived inside it himself for years. "What's going on, Bug?" he asked. She shrugged, poked her toast. "Mia, Emma said I can't come to her birthday party," she said, "because I don't have a mom to bring me." Logan set his coffee down. "Emma said that." "Her mom said it. Emma told me." She finally looked up. Her eyes were dry. She'd already cried this one out probably last night in her room quietly, the way she'd learned to do things quietly. That thought hit him somewhere below the ribs and stayed there. "Is it true that I need a mom?" "No," he said. "It's not true." "Then why did she say it?" "Because some people say things that are wrong," he said. "And when people say things that are wrong about you, that's about them, not you." She thought about that with the intense seriousness that 9-year-olds bring to things that matter. "But I still can't go to the party." "We'll figure out the party," he said. "You want me to talk to Emma's mom?" "No." Immediate. Emphatic. "That would be so embarrassing, Dad." "Right, of course, very embarrassing." He pushed her toast closer to her. "Eat. You'll feel better." She ate. She didn't feel visibly better, but she ate, which was something. He drove her to school and watched her walk through the front doors, backpack too big for her frame. Ponytail slightly crooked because she'd done it herself and refused help, and the familiar complicated weight settled across his chest. The weight that every single parent knew. The one that didn't have a name but lived in the space between "I'm doing everything I can" and "I wonder if it's enough." He sat in the school drop-off line longer than he needed to. Then he drove to work. Logan ran a small security consulting firm he'd built from scratch after leaving the Navy. 3 full-time employees, a handful of contractors, a client roster that was modest but reliable. It wasn't the life he'd imagined at 22, but it was his fully and completely, and there was something to be said for that. His business partner and closest friend, Dre Coleman, was already at his desk when Logan walked in, which was unusual because Dre generally held the philosophical position that mornings were a hostile environment. "You look terrible," Dre said by way of good morning. "Mia had a rough start," Logan said, dropping into his chair. "That the whole story?" Logan pulled up his email. "No." Dre swiveled his chair. Dre had been Special Forces before a knee injury retired him, and he had the specific quality of patience that comes from spending long hours in silence, waiting for things to happen. He could outwait anyone. Logan had lost more arguments to Dre's silence than he could count. "Isabella Vaughn called me this morning," Logan said. Dre didn't move. "The CEO?" "Yes." "The Billionaire CEO?" "Yes." "The one you—" "I kept her from falling at a party, Dre. That's all." "That's what you said on the phone. I thought you were being modest." Dre leaned back. "But she called you." "She wants to have dinner." The silence stretched out. Outside a car horn. The coffee maker finishing its cycle. "Logan," Dre said finally. "I know." "Do you, though?" "Yes." "Because there are about 40 ways that goes badly, and about 2 ways it goes well. And the 2 ways it goes well still end in the same place, which is—" "She's out of my league, I know." Logan rubbed the back of his neck. "I'm aware of the math." "It's not even about league," Dre said. "It's about world. She lives in a different world, man. Those people don't just date differently, they move differently. Everything is political. Everything has a cost. You've got a 9-year-old daughter who is already dealing with not having a mother, and you want to bring a media-scrutinized CEO into that picture. I said yes to dinner. I didn't propose. Yet. Dre. I'm just saying the trajectory of how you said her name just now tells me this isn't nothing." Logan didn't answer, which between the two of them was its own kind of answer. Dre turned back to his desk. "Just be careful," he said. "That's all I'm saying. Be careful. You sound like Marcus." "Marcus is a smart man." A pause. "What restaurant?" "She said she'd text me the address." "Of course she did," Dre said. "Women like that don't ask. They inform." Maud. The address she texted was not a restaurant. It was her building. The residential tower in the financial district, 42 floors of glass, an engineered silence, the kind of building that had its own concierge service, and a lobby that made the Arcadia Hotel look casual. The text simply said, Thursday, 7 p.m. "Come up, I'll cook. IV." Logan read it twice. Then he called her. She picked up on the second ring. "You're going to cook," he said. "I'm capable of cooking." "I didn't say you weren't. It's not what I expected." "What did you expect? A restaurant where I'd have to Google which fork to use." She laughed. It was the first time he'd heard her laugh, a real one, unguarded, catching her off guard as much as it caught him. It lasted only a second before she seemed to collect it back, but it had happened, and they both knew it. "I don't like restaurants for things that matter," she said. "Too many eyes. Too many people who recognize me and start performing. I'd rather just—" A brief pause. "I'd rather just have a normal conversation with a person." "When's the last time you had one of those?" he asked. The pause that followed was long enough to answer the question without any words. "Thursday," she said. 7 o'clock. "I'll be there," he said. He told himself the whole drive over that it was just dinner. He had told himself this approximately 40 times since Thursday morning, with decreasing conviction each time. By the time he was standing in her building's lobby, showing ID to a concierge, whose suit probably cost more than Logan's monthly truck payment, he had mostly abandoned the effort and was just operating on forward momentum. The elevator opened directly into her apartment. He'd known it would. He'd done enough security work to understand how the top floors of buildings like this operated, but the reality of it still registered. The space was large and clean, and had the specific quality of a place that had been decorated with precision and lived in carefully, like someone who'd been taught to want beautiful things, but hadn't entirely figured out what to do with them. Isabella was in the kitchen. She was wearing jeans and a white shirt, with the sleeves rolled up, her hair loose around her shoulders, and for a moment he just stood there in the elevator threshold, because she looked so comprehensively different from the woman in the emerald dress that it took a half-second recalibration. "You actually came," she said, looking up from the stove. "You sound surprised. I was 40% sure you'd cancel." She pointed a wooden spoon at the counter island. "Sit, there's wine if you want it. There's also water. I went with water. Water's good." She poured 2 glasses and slid one across the island toward him. He sat on one of the bar stools and watched her work. She moved in the kitchen with the particular focused competence of someone who'd learned to cook as a form of control in a life that had very little of it. "What are you making?" he asked. "Pasta. My mother's recipe." She was Italian-American, very strict about the sauce. She stirred without looking at him. "She passed away 6 years ago. My father remarried within 14 months, which tells you everything you need to know about my family dynamic." "I'm sorry about your mother." "Thank you." "A beat. You lost someone too, I can tell." He looked at her. "My wife. Mia's mom. She left when Mia was 2. She's not dead, she just decided the life wasn't what she wanted." He said it the way he'd learned to say it, flat and factual, the way you talk about old injuries. It's its own kind of loss. Isabella was quiet for a moment, stirring. "That might be harder," she said finally. "When someone chooses to leave, you spend years wondering what you did wrong. When someone dies..." She paused. "At least you know it wasn't a choice." He hadn't thought about it exactly that way before. He sat with it for a moment. "Mia's your daughter," she said. 9 years old. You mentioned her at the hotel." "Yeah." He found himself doing what he always did when Mia came up, a quiet inventory, proud and worried in equal measure simultaneously. "She's something else." "How so?" "She's smarter than me, already. Like objectively. She reads at a 7th grade level. She's doing multiplication that I have to double check because I stopped trusting my own arithmetic a few years back." He paused. "She had a rough morning today. A kid at school said something unkind about her not having a mother." Isabella's stirring slowed. "What did you say to her?" "That it was about the other kid, not about Mia." "Did she believe you?" "Not entirely, but she will eventually. I just have to keep saying it." He turned the water glass in his hands. "What you say to a kid at 9, they carry it for a long time. So I try to be careful about what I send them out into the world with." Isabella had stopped stirring entirely. She was looking at him with an expression that was quiet and a little bit unguarded, the way her face had been for those 40 minutes in the staff lounge, like something had put a small, careful crack in the surface. "Nobody talks to me the way you do," she said. "What way is that? Like the conversation is actually about something." She turned back to the stove. "Usually people are talking to my position, or to what they need from me, or to the image." She gave the sauce one firm stir. "Even people I've known for years." "That sounds lonely," he said. She didn't answer immediately. She plated the pasta, slid a bowl across to him, and came around the island to sit on the stool beside him rather than across from him. A small geography that meant something. "It's the loneliest thing in the world," she said quietly, "to be surrounded by people who only see the version of you that benefits them." The honesty of it landed in the room with real weight. He recognized it, not the billionaire version of it, but the human version. He'd felt it himself after coming home from deployment. The way people wanted the hero or the victim, or the strong man, or the broken man. They wanted a type. They didn't always want the actual complicated specific person. "I know something about that," he said. "I know you do," she said. "That's why I called." They ate the pasta. It was genuinely excellent, the kind of sauce that tasted like someone's mother, which was the best kind, and somewhere between the first bowl and the second, the conversation shifted from careful to easy, in the way that sometimes happens when two people stop performing for each other and just start talking. She asked about his deployments, not in the way people usually asked, which was either overly reverent or vaguely afraid, but straightforwardly, like she wanted to actually understand, rather than to have something to say about it. He told her about Fallujah, about the vehicle, about Marcus pulling him out. He told her things he didn't usually tell people on a first. He stopped himself mentally, because this was not a date. He reminded himself this was just dinner. But the word first had arrived in his head with a comfortable confidence that troubled him slightly. She told him about taking over Vaughn Capital at 28, the board members who'd underestimated her, the strategy she'd used to outmaneuver them not by fighting, but by being so thoroughly prepared that fighting became unnecessary. She talked about it with a quiet intensity that was fascinating to watch, not arrogance, just precision. The specific confidence of someone who'd been underestimated so many times that they'd stopped being angry about it and started using it. "My father thought I'd last a year," she said. "He said so publicly to a journalist. I have the article framed in my office." "Why framed?" "Because every time I think I'm tired, I look at it." She tilted her head. "Is that petty?" "That's fuel," he said. "There's a difference." She smiled. This time, she didn't collect it back. They stayed at that counter talking until well past 10 o'clock. He noticed the time and felt the small shock of it, the way time accelerates in good conversation, the hours folding in on themselves, and stood up. "I should go," he said. "You should," she agreed. She didn't move for a moment. Then she stood too and walked him to the elevator. They stood there for a second in that specific, charged quiet of an ending that neither person wants to be an ending. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Thank you for the pasta," he said. "Your mother's recipe was right." Something moved across her face at that, quick and complicated, and then gone. "She would have liked that you said that," she said. He stepped into the elevator, turned to face her. "Mia has a school thing on Saturday," he said. "A science fair. She built a working model of a water filtration system from YouTube tutorials and a lot of my patients." He paused. "I don't know why I'm telling you that." "Because you're proud of her," Isabella said simply. The elevator doors closed. He drove home with both hands on the wheel again. The city moved past the windows, ordinary and quiet. He thought about the way Isabella had said lonely, not with self-pity, but with the blunt accuracy of someone finally naming a thing that had been true for a very long time. He thought about Mia, about the crooked ponytail and the birthday party she couldn't attend, and the way she'd eaten her toast anyway, because some things you push through even when they hurt. He thought about two people at a kitchen counter talking like it actually meant something. He was 3 blocks from home when his phone buzzed on the passenger seat. He waited until the next red light to look at it. It was from her number. 4 words. Same time, next week. He sat at the red light, looked at the message, looked at the green light when it changed. Then he typed back 2 words, put the phone face down on the seat, and drove the rest of the way home. Yes, absolutely. The second Wednesday came and went, and then the third, and somewhere between the third and the fourth, Logan stopped telling himself it was just dinner. He wasn't sure of the exact moment. It might have been the Wednesday she'd called him at 6 in the afternoon, 45 minutes before he was supposed to arrive, and said, "I burnt the sauce. I'm serious, Logan. It's completely destroyed. I don't know what happened. It was fine. And then it just, can we do Thai food?" And he'd laughed, genuinely. Laughed and said yes, and she'd ordered from a place that delivered in a car service, because that was how her world operated, and they'd eaten pad thai at her kitchen counter, and talked until midnight about whether persistence or talent mattered more in the long run. She'd argued talent. He'd argued persistence. Neither of them had conceded. They'd both gone to sleep that night still holding their positions. It might have been that, or it might have been the Saturday of Mia's science fair when Logan had sent her a photo of Mia's water filtration display just because he'd mentioned it and she'd remembered it and he'd wanted her to see it and she'd written back, "She's going to run something someday. I can tell just from the setup." And then, after a pause, "You should be proud of yourself too." She got that from somewhere. He'd stood in the middle of the school gymnasium with other parents half listening to a child explain the nitrogen cycle and read that text 3 times. Whatever the exact moment was, by the 4th Wednesday, he had stopped pretending and started being honest with himself about what this was becoming. Which meant he also had to be honest about what it was going to cost. He was thinking about exactly that sitting in his truck outside her building at 6:52 p.m., 8 minutes early, because he was always early old military habit when his phone rang, not Isabella. A number he recognized but hadn't expected. His ex-wife, Karen. He stared at it for 2 full rings. Karen called for 2 reasons: logistical matters involving Mia and disruption. The calls were rarely equal parts of both. He picked up. "Karen? Logan." Her voice was the same as it had always been. Precise, slightly clipped, the voice of a woman who treated conversation like a series of points to be made and cleared. "I need to talk to you about Mia." "What about Mia?" "I want to see her. I'm going to be in the city next month and I think it would be good for her to..." "Karen." He kept his voice level. "She hasn't heard from you in 8 months. I know. I've been..." 8 months. She turned 9 in April and you sent a card. A card. She carried it around for 2 days and then put it in her drawer and we haven't talked about it. Silence on the line. A particular kind of silence that he recognized, the silence of someone recalibrating rather than actually feeling the weight of what they'd done. "I'm trying," Karen said. "Trying looks different from where I'm standing," he said. "I'll talk to Mia. I'll see what she wants. But I'm not going to set her up for something that hurts her, Karen. That's not happening." "You've always been so protective." "Yeah." He looked at his watch. "I'll call you next week." He hung up before she could reframe the conversation in a direction he didn't have the energy for tonight. He sat in the truck for another minute. The weight of it settled across his shoulders, not anger exactly, more like fatigue. The specific fatigue of being the only wall between his daughter and a world that occasionally wanted to reach in and knock things over. He'd been carrying that weight for 7 years. He was good at it by now. But good at carrying something didn't mean it was light. He got out of the truck and went upstairs. Isabella opened the elevator door before he'd finished stepping out, which meant she'd seen him on the building's camera feed. She'd mentioned once that she always checked old habit from years of receiving unwanted visitors who used her address as a statement. She looked at his face and said nothing for a moment. Then, "What happened?" "My ex-wife called," he said. "It's fine. I'm fine." "You can be fine and still have something happened," she said, stepping back to let him in. He came into the apartment and set his jacket on the stool. She handed him a glass of water without being asked, the way you do for someone when you've started learning them. "She wants to come back around," he said. "See Mia." Isabella leaned against the counter. She was wearing the dark blue sweater she'd worn 2 Wednesdays ago, the one that was slightly too long in the sleeves, and her hair was in a low knot that was already partially falling out. He had cataloged these details without meaning to. That was the thing about paying attention to someone. You started accumulating them. "How do you feel about that?" she asked. "I feel like Mia is the one who gets to decide if she has the capacity for that right now. Not Karen, not me." He turned the water glass. "And I feel like I've spent 7 years protecting a kid from the fallout of a decision an adult made, and I'm tired," which is not something I usually say out loud. "Then say it again," Isabella said. "You're tired." "I'm tired," he said. And then, almost against his will, "I'm really tired, Isabella." She didn't say anything comforting and hollow, which was what he'd half expected, and what he'd have been vaguely embarrassed by. She just nodded, like she was receiving the information at full weight, and not rushing to put it down somewhere easier. "I know that kind of tired," she said. "It's the kind that isn't about sleep." "No," he said. "It's not." They stood in the kitchen for a moment, two people holding the quiet between them the way you hold something careful. Then she said, "Come on. I made soup, nothing burnt. I was very vigilant about the soup." He sat down, and she set a bowl in front of him, and the smell of it was warm and real, and he felt by degrees the tension across his shoulders begin to soften. "Tell me something about Mia," Isabella said. "Something good." He looked at her. She was serious, genuinely curious, not filling silence. "She's been writing a book," he said. "She doesn't know I know. She writes it in a notebook she keeps under her mattress, which she clearly thinks is a secret location. But I found it by accident when I was changing her sheets. I put it right back. I didn't read it, but I know it exists." Isabella smiled. "A book, at 9. It's about a girl who discovers her family is secretly running a dragon sanctuary in the basement and has to keep it from the government." He paused. "She told me about it, the basic idea, months ago. I pretended it was theoretical. She was working out the plot." "That's extraordinary. She's extraordinary," he said with a quiet certainty that had nothing to do with pride and everything to do with fact. Isabella looked at him the way she sometimes did, like she was doing math. But the math was about something that didn't have a formula. "You talk about her differently than people usually talk about their children," she said. "How do people usually talk about their children? Like accomplishments, or like burdens, or like accessories?" She tilted her head. "You talk about Mia like she's a person you genuinely respect." "She is," he said simply. "I liked her before I loved her. That sounds strange, but it's true. The first day she really talked back to me, she was 4. She told me my pancakes were, quote, structurally unsound, because I'd made them too thin. I thought, yeah, I like this person. I want to know who she turns out to be." Isabella was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful in the way it got when she was saying something that cost her something. "I wonder sometimes what my life would have been like if someone had looked at me that way," she said. "When I was 9, just seen me as a person, not as the next Vaughn, not as the heir, just a kid with ideas. Your father didn't do that. My father looked at me and saw what I could become for the company. That's not nothing. He pushed me harder than anyone." She turned her soup bowl slowly in her hands. "But push isn't the same as look. I figured that out somewhere around 30, which is probably late, but better late." She paused. "What you said to Mia after the birthday party thing, about it being about the other kid, not about her. My father would have told me to use it as motivation. Get tougher. Don't let them see it affects you. And what would that have done to you?" "It did do something to me," she said flatly. "I'm 31 years old, Logan, and until about a month ago, the last conversation I'd had that felt like a real conversation was with my therapist, who I pay specifically to have real conversations with me." She said it without self-pity, almost clinically. "I had become very, very good at performance, and very bad at this." "At what?" She gestured between them. "This." He understood what she meant. He also understood what it had cost her to say it, and he didn't minimize that by responding too quickly or too smoothly. He let it sit between them the way it deserved to sit. "I have a confession," he said after a moment. She raised her eyebrows. "Dre, my business partner, told me the first week that there were 40 ways this went badly and 2 ways it went well, and both the good ways ended in the same place. Which is," he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "What did you say to him?" "I said I was just going to dinner." He looked at her directly. "That was a lie, not to him, to myself." The silence that followed had a different quality than their usual silences. More charge to it, like the air before something shifts. "Logan," she said quietly. "I know," he said. "I know all the reasons this is complicated. I know what your world is and what mine is, and I know about Mia, and I know about the optics of your position, and I know I own a truck that is 12 years old, and your elevator opens into your living room." He stopped. "I know all of it. And I drove here anyway," he said. "Every Wednesday. And I'll probably drive here next Wednesday too." She looked at him for a long moment. The kind of look that isn't looking for something that's already found it and is deciding what to do about the finding. "I have to tell you something," she said. "Something I haven't told anyone outside my executive team." He waited. She took a breath. "I'm stepping down from the CEO position. I'm announcing it at the end of the month." He hadn't expected that. He absorbed it without reacting outwardly, the way he'd been trained to absorb unexpected intelligence, take it in, assess, then respond. "Why?" he asked. "Because I've been running on a version of myself that isn't sustainable," she said. "Because I took over the company at 28 to prove something to a man who wasn't paying attention, and I proved it, and then I kept proving it, and I never stopped long enough to ask myself what I actually wanted." She paused. "I'm not leaving the company. I'm moving to a different role, one with more vision work and less performance." A beat. "One that feels like mine." "How long have you been thinking about this?" "Honestly, since that night at the Arcadia." She said it with a kind of precision that told him she'd thought it through carefully and wasn't being dramatic about it. "Not because of you specifically, but because of what you did. You looked at me in a room full of people who looked through me, and you saw someone who needed help, not an asset or a threat or a symbol. And it was so simple. It was just human." She pressed her lips together. "And I realized I hadn't felt human in a very long time." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "What does your board say?" "The board doesn't know yet. I'm telling you first." She paused, as if she was aware of what that meant, and had decided to be aware of it anyway. "Which tells you something about the state of my social life, but also something else." "Something else," he repeated. "You're the person I wanted to tell first," she said. "Make of that what you will." He made of it exactly what it was. He also made of it the understanding that this was the moment, the specific moment where a man either stepped back into the geometry of practical distance, or he didn't. He'd been in enough situations where the decision point was clear, even when the decision was hard. This was one of those. He reached across the counter and covered her hand with his. Not a romantic gesture exactly, not yet, but a real one. Solid. Present. "Congratulations," he said, "on choosing yourself." Her jaw tightened for a half-second, the way it did when she was keeping something back. Then she turned her hand over under his and let him hold it properly. "It's terrifying," she said. "I know how to be the CEO. I know exactly who that person is and what she does and how she walks into a room. I don't entirely know who I am without it." "You're the person who burnt the sauce and ordered Thai food and didn't make me feel bad for showing up tired," he said. "That's a start." She laughed, the real one, the unguarded one that she couldn't quite catch before it happened. And when it faded, she was looking at him with something that was past careful and past diplomatic, and just entirely honest. "This is terrifying in a different way too," she said. "I know," he said. "You have a daughter." "Yes. And I have never—" She stopped. "I don't have a good record with things that matter. I work better with things I can control." "I know," he said again. "I'm not controllable. Neither is Mia. Neither is anything that's worth it." She looked at their hands. His was rougher than hers, a life of physical work and weather and the kind of tasks that leave marks. She turned their joined hands over like she was studying the difference. "Tell me something true," she said. "Something you don't usually say." He thought about it. "I've been lonely for a long time," he said. "Not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind. The kind where your life is full. Mia worked Dre Marcus, and you go to sleep every night grateful for all of it, and still feel like there's a specific kind of quiet in the room that shouldn't be there." She looked up from their hands. "Yeah," she said softly. "That's the kind I know." I know you know it, he said. I could tell that night at the hotel before you said a single word to me. You were the loneliest person in a room full of people. So were you, she said. So were we both, he agreed. They stayed like that for a moment. The city outside went about its ordinary nighttime business, indifferent and continuous. Inside, two people who had spent years building walls that looked nothing like walls. Hers made of achievement and untouchability. His made of duty and quiet endurance, sat at a kitchen counter and held each other's hands and didn't look away. It was Mia who interrupted in the way that children interrupt everything important, but without meaning to. Logan's phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at it. A text from Mrs. Callahan, his neighbor who had Mia for the evening. She's asking when you're coming home. She says she needs to tell you something about the book. He stared at that last line. Then he looked up at Isabella. She knows I know, he said. About the book. About the book. He shook his head slowly. 9 years old. She figured it out. Told you, Isabella said. She's going to run something someday. He stood reluctantly and reached for his jacket. Isabella walked him to the elevator, and they stood in that familiar threshold of endings that felt like they were becoming something else. The announcement, he said. When you make it, it's going to get loud. I know. Reporters, speculation. People are going to want a reason. I'll give them a professional one, she said. The real one is mine. He nodded. He stepped into the elevator and then stopped one hand on the doorframe and said, Isabella, when it gets loud if you need somewhere quiet, I make structurally unsound pancakes, but I make a lot of them. She stood in the opening and looked at him for a moment with those serious, honest eyes. I'll remember that, she said. Good. The elevator closed. He rode down 42 floors alone, smiling at nothing in particular. Outside, he texted Mrs. Callahan. On my way. 20 minutes. Then he sat in the truck for exactly 30 seconds, because he needed 30 seconds just to hold everything in his chest that was currently happening there before he drove back to his daughter and his life and the specific, complicated, beautiful weight of being the person he was. Then he started the truck and headed home. Behind him, 42 floors up, Isabella Vaughn stood at her window for a long time after the elevator closed. She wasn't looking at the city exactly. She was looking at the decision she'd made the announcement the change, and the far more frightening thing that was growing in the space between every Wednesday and the next. She'd spent 10 years being untouchable. She was beginning to suspect that had been the loneliest thing of all. The announcement broke on a Tuesday. Logan was in the middle of a client walkthrough a mid-sized logistics company that wanted upgraded access protocols for their warehouse facilities when Dre texted him a link with no message attached, just the link. Which from Dre meant, drop what you're doing. He excused himself, stepped into the hallway, and opened it. The headline was from the Wall Street Journal. Isabella Vaughn steps down as CEO of Vaughn Capital in surprise move. Board cites planned transition. Sources say otherwise. He read the first 3 paragraphs, standing in a fluorescent hallway that smelled like industrial cleaner, and by the 3rd paragraph, the word sources had appeared 4 times, which told him everything he needed to know about the quality of the reporting. None of the sources were named. None of the speculation was grounded in anything real. But the speculation was vivid: a power struggle with the board, a failed acquisition, a personal scandal, a breakdown. The internet, he knew, would do the rest. He texted her immediately. I saw it. You okay? 3 minutes passed. 5. He went back into the client meeting and got through the rest of it on autopilot, the way he'd learned to operate when part of his brain was occupied somewhere else. When he checked his phone again in the parking lot, she'd replied. Define okay. He called her. She picked up on the first ring, which told him she'd been waiting for the call. How bad is it? He asked. On a scale of 1 to 10. Her voice was steady, but he could hear what was underneath the steady, the tight, controlled quality of someone managing a situation by force of will. About a 7, which I expected. I'm more concerned about the direction it's heading. Which direction is that? Personal, she said. Someone on the board talked. Not about the real reason they don't know the real reason, but about the timing. There's a narrative forming that something happened. Something that caused this. And when people decide something happened, they go looking for a what? A pause. Or a who. Logan understood exactly what she was not quite saying. Have they connected anything to me? Not yet. You're not in my world, Logan. You don't have a digital footprint that intersects with mine in any searchable way. She paused again. But I have a driver who saw me get out of an elevator that you were in. And I have a building concierge who logged your ID 4 times in the past month. Okay, he said. Flat. Practical. He switched into the mode that had kept him alive in places where information was dangerous and the management of it mattered. What do you need from me right now? I need... She stopped. He heard her take a breath and then let it out. Honestly, I need to not be alone with this, but I also don't want to be the reason something lands on you and Mia. You let me worry about Mia. Logan. I'm serious, Isabella. You're not responsible for managing the fallout for me. I'm a grown man. I've been in worse situations than a reporter asking questions. He paused. What's your plan for the press? Statement this afternoon. Planned, professional. I'm framing it as a strategic evolution, which is partly true, and declining comment on anything speculative. Her voice had shifted slightly into the register she used when she was talking about work precise, slightly clipped efficient. Then it shifted back. My father called. The way she said it told him everything about what that conversation had been. What did he say? He said I was throwing away everything he built. A beat. I told him I was protecting it by giving it leadership that wanted to be there. He said that was a very convenient way to frame quitting. Another beat longer. He used the word quitting. Logan was quiet for a moment. He chose his next words carefully. Is that what you're doing? No. No hesitation. No, it's not. I know the difference. But he doesn't. He never has between choosing something and abandoning something. A pause, and when she spoke again, her voice was slightly different. Smaller. Not weak, just more honest. He's the only person whose opinion I never fully stopped caring about, which is the most inconvenient thing I know about myself. That's not inconvenient, Logan said. That's human. She was quiet for a moment. Then, come over tonight, please. Not for any just. Come over. I'll be there at 7, he said. He told Dre before he left the office. Not everything Dre didn't need everything, but enough. That the announcement had happened that Isabella had asked him to come, that things were accelerating in ways that weren't entirely controllable. Dre listened the way Dre always listened. Then he said, The press is going to find you, Logan. Maybe not today. Maybe not this week. But they will. I know. And when they do, it won't just be your name in an article. It'll be a story. Single father Navy vet, no money. She's a billionaire CEO who just blew up her career. They'll build a narrative. Probably. What does that do to Mia? Logan looked at him. What do you want me to say, Dre? I want you to have thought about it. I've thought about it. He picked up his jacket. I've thought about it every day for the past month. And I keep coming back to the same place. Which is that I've spent 7 years making the safe choice, the careful choice, protecting Mia from everything that might disrupt her, might hurt her, might complicate things. And she's a great kid because of some of that. He paused at the door. But she's also writing a book alone in her room and carrying a stuffed elephant, and she cried about a birthday party alone at night so I wouldn't worry. He looked at Dre. I don't want my daughter to grow up watching her father choose the safe version of things and call it wisdom. Dre was quiet for a long time. Okay, he said finally. Just that. Okay. Okay. I still think it's 40-2 odds, Dre said. But okay. Isabella was on the phone when he stepped out of the elevator, pacing the far end of the apartment, with the focused energy of someone who had been managing an escalating situation for 8 hours straight. She held up one finger at him 1 minute and kept talking. He set his jacket down, went to the kitchen and put water on for coffee because he'd learned she drank coffee when she was working and tea when she was winding down, and right now she was clearly still working. No, she was saying. No comment on timeline, no comment on the board's internal communications. What I said in the statement is what I said, and the statement is complete. A pause. Tell him if he wants a quote, he can look at my quote which is in the statement which I provided. Another pause. Thank you, Daniel. She hung up and stood still for a second with the phone pressed against her sternum, eyes closed. He'd seen soldiers do that, the 5-second reset after a sustained engagement, just finding the floor under your feet again. Then she opened her eyes, saw the coffee going, and something in her face eased by a fraction. You're making coffee, she said. You've been on the phone for 8 hours, he said. Sit down. She sat. Not on the bar stool, but on the couch. Which was unusual, she rarely used the couch. It was one of those things he'd noticed, like the couch was a room she kept for decoration and hadn't quite given herself permission to actually inhabit. She sat on it now and let her head fall back and stared at the ceiling. My father called 3 more times after we talked, she said. I didn't pick up after the second. What did the second call say? She lifted her head. That if I was making this decision because of a man, I was a fool. The word landed between them with all of its weight. Logan set a mug on the coffee table in front of her. Then he sat in the chair across from her, giving her space. Same as that first night in the hotel lounge, because some things you don't crowd. Are you? She looked at him directly. No, she said. I made this decision because it was right. Because I've been running on empty for 3 years, and I knew it, and I kept going because stopping felt like losing. She paused. But I also won't pretend that this... She gestured between them, the same way she had 2 weeks ago. Didn't remind me that there's a version of my life where I'm an actual person, which made it harder to keep ignoring what needed to change. That's honest, he said. I'm trying to be, she said. It's harder than it looks. I was trained to be strategic, not honest. Strategic and honest are sometimes the same thing, but mostly they're not. He watched her drink the coffee. She held the mug the way she held things when she was tired, close to her chest. Both hands like warmth was the point, rather than the caffeine. Your father, Logan said carefully. Tell me about him, not the senator, the father. She thought about it. He's a man who decided at some point that love and pressure were the same thing. He pushed because he cared. He criticized because he believed in potential. He withheld approval as a strategic tool because he thought it would make me work harder. She turned the mug. And it did. It absolutely did. I am measurably, provably successful because of how hard I worked to get him to look at me and see something he was proud of. She paused. I'm also 31 and sitting on a couch I've never really sat on telling a man I've known for 6 weeks things I've never told a therapist. What does that tell you? He asked. That approval from the wrong source is the most expensive thing in the world, she said. And that I've been paying for it my whole life. The room was quiet. Outside, the city continued its relentless, unquiet, all traffic and ambition, and lives moving at speeds that never quite slowed down. Inside, the coffee cooled slightly, and neither of them moved. Can I tell you what I see? Logan said. She looked at him. I see a woman who built something extraordinary while running on a fuel source that was slowly poisoning her, he said. And I see her choosing to change the fuel source before the engine went. That's not quitting. That's mechanics. Her jaw tightened briefly. You always do that, she said. Do what? Find the frame that's both true and kinder than what I was thinking. She put the mug down. It's a very specific skill, Logan. Where did you learn it? Mia, he said. 9 years of having to explain the world to someone who can tell when you're being truthful and when you're being gentle, and making peace with the fact that the best explanations are both at once. She looked at him for a long moment. I want to meet her, she said. He hadn't expected it that directly. He absorbed it. That's a big step. I know it is. She's not. She's not a part of the situation that can be walked back, he said. If she meets you and it means something to her and then it doesn't work, that's a cost she pays. Not me. Her. I know, Isabella said. That's why I'm asking. Because I want you to know I understand what it means. I'm not asking casually. He studied her face. The earnestness in it, the specific earnestness of someone who didn't do earnest often, and was doing it now with both hands. She already knows about you, he said. Isabella blinked. She does. She knows I've been going somewhere on Wednesdays. She's 9, not oblivious. She asked me 2 weeks ago if I had a friend. He paused. I said yes. What did she say? She said, and I'm quoting directly, "Is she nice or is she a work friend because work friends don't count?" Isabella's mouth curved. What did you tell her? I told her she was the nicest person I'd had dinner with in a long time. He paused. She said, "Does she know about my book?" I said no. She said, "Then don't tell her yet. Some things you tell people yourself." Isabella sat very still for a moment. He could see her processing it, the specific image of a 9-year-old making decisions about information sovereignty, and he watched the moment it landed fully, the small complicated thing that crossed her face. She sounds like someone worth being careful for, Isabella said quietly. She is? Logan said. So are you. She looked at him. The apartment was quiet. The coffee was cold now, and neither of them cared. Logan, she said. And the way she said it was different from all the other times, not filing it somewhere, not using it as punctuation, but using it the way you use a word when the word itself is the whole sentence. Yeah, he said. I'm scared, she said. I want to be clear about that. This isn't a thing I do. I don't let people in. I never have. Not all the way. She held his eyes. But I also think that the thing I've been most afraid of my entire adult life is exactly this. Being seen. Really seen. And then... She stopped. And then, he prompted gently. And then found wanting, she said. Seen all the way through, and found to be not enough. He stood up from the chair. He moved to the couch and sat beside her, not across, not at a careful distance, but beside her and said, Isabella, I've had dinner with you 6 times. I've seen you burn sauce and order emergency Thai food. I've seen you on the phone for 8 hours running a crisis, and then sit on a couch and tell me the truth about your father. I've seen the way you talk about your mother when you think you're not being obvious about missing her. He paused. I have not found you wanting. I have found the opposite of wanting. She looked at him with those honest, serious eyes, and for a moment the whole careful architecture of who she'd built herself to be was just suspended. Not collapsed, not dismantled, just set down. Like she'd finally found somewhere safe to put it for a minute. She leaned her head against his shoulder. It was a small thing, the smallest possible thing. But he understood the size of it, understood that for this particular woman, this was the equivalent of crossing a very long distance. He didn't move. He just let her be there the way you let someone be somewhere when they've finally stopped walking. They stayed like that for a while. The city went on outside. The coffee stayed cold. Then her phone buzzed on the cushion beside her. She didn't reach for it immediately, which was itself a statement about how far they'd come in 6 weeks, because 6 weeks ago, she'd have reached for it before the first buzz finished. On the second buzz, she picked it up, read the screen. He felt her go still in the specific way that meant something had arrived that required a response. What? He said. She turned the phone so he could see it. It was a text from a number labeled simply, Dad. There's a photograph. Page 6 has it. You and a man in your building lobby. They're running it tomorrow morning with a story. I suggest you get ahead of it tonight, for the company's sake, if not your own. Logan read it twice. Then he leaned back and looked at the ceiling. Okay, he said. Okay. She was watching him. How do you want to handle it? She stared at him. You're not. She stopped. You're not panicking. Does panicking help? No, but most people. She stopped again. Most people I've dated in the past, when something like this happened, and it's happened, the press is part of my life, they either panicked or they performed. They gave me a speech about being ready for it, and then 3 days later they weren't ready for it. I'm not performing, he said. And I'm not panicking. I'm asking you what you want to do because this is your world and your call, and I'll back whatever you decide. She looked at him for a long moment. What if what I decide is to not get ahead of it? To just let it be what it is? A photograph of a woman and a man in a lobby. No comment. No statement. Then that's what it is, he said. It'll create noise. Let it. My father is not the one making this decision, Logan said quietly. You are. Another long moment. She set the phone face down on the cushion. My father has been making decisions for me my whole life, she said. Directly when I was young. Indirectly after. Through the standard he set, and the approval he withheld, and the version of success he defined that I then spent 15 years chasing. She looked at her phone face down on the cushion. I announced my resignation from a position he built because I chose my own life over his expectations. I'm not calling a press contact at 10 at night because he sent a text. No, Logan agreed. No, she said with more weight. Like she was saying it to the phone, to the text, to 15 years of something. No. She left the phone where it was. After a moment, she said, Tell me something about the Navy. Something you've never told anyone. He thought about it. Really thought about it the way he did when she asked him questions like this. Questions that expected the real answer, not the managed one. There was a kid in my unit, he said slowly. 19 years old, first deployment. He was terrified the entire time, and he never showed it once. Not in any way you could point to. He just performed competence. Every single day. Perfect soldier, perfect face. He paused. He broke down the day before we rotated home. Just completely broke down quietly alone. And I found him, and I sat with him, and he said he was afraid that now that it was over, he didn't know how to stop. Didn't know how to be a person who wasn't performing. Isabella was very still. What happened to him? She asked. He figured it out, Logan said. It took time. It was not a straight line. But he figured it out. He looked at her. You're figuring it out. She was quiet for a moment. How do you know? Because you're sitting on a couch that you never sat on before tonight, he said. And you left your phone face down. She looked at the phone. Then she looked at him. And something shifted in her expression that he recognized, not quite a decision, but the moment just before a decision, when a person stops weighing and starts choosing. Stay, she said. Not just stay for a while. Don't go home yet. Mrs. Callahan has Mia until 9, he said. It's 7:42. I know, he said. He didn't move toward the elevator. He settled back against the couch instead, and she settled back beside him, and the city outside went on doing what cities do, which is everything at once, without pause, without apology, without waiting for anyone to be ready. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Mia texting from Mrs. Callahan's landline because she wasn't allowed a cell phone yet, and this rule produced a creative workaround every time. Dad, when you come, can you bring the thing you promised? He had no memory of promising a thing. He texted back. What thing? 30 seconds. You know the thing. He showed it to Isabella. She read it and laughed. The real one, the whole one, the one she couldn't catch. She's negotiating, Isabella said. For something she hasn't identified yet. She's leaving herself room. She does this, he said. It's actually a sophisticated strategy. She learned it somewhere. He looked at her. I don't negotiate. You absolutely negotiate, Isabella said. You just do it so calmly that people don't realize they're in a negotiation. She tilted her head. You negotiated with me the night you walked me out of that ballroom. You knew I needed an exit, and you gave me one that let me keep my dignity. That's a negotiation. He thought about it. That's just being decent. Logan, she said very gently, Most people don't know the difference. He texted Mia back. I'll bring the thing. See you at 9. Love you, bug. The response came in 6 seconds. Love you, Dad. He put the phone in his pocket. Beside him, Isabella had pulled one knee up onto the couch, gradually becoming a person who lived in this apartment in all of its rooms, and was looking at the darkened window with an expression that was quieter and more settled than any he'd seen on her. Thank you, she said, not looking at him. For what? For not leaving when it got complicated. A pause. And for the coffee. And for staying till 9. Thank you for the pasta, he said. The first time. Your mother's recipe. She smiled at the window. She would have liked you, she said. She had very little patience for performance. She would have liked someone who just showed up. I showed up, he said. You showed up, she agreed. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, for the first time in longer than either of them could cleanly remember, two people sat in a room and felt no particular need to be anyone other than exactly who they were, which was for both of them more than enough. The photograph ran on page 6 the next morning at 6:47 a.m. Logan knew the exact time because that was when his phone started. Not a single call a sequence. Dre first, then Marcus, then a number he didn't recognize that he let go to voicemail. Then Dre again. He was already awake. He'd been awake since 5, sitting at the kitchen table with coffee, having made peace during the night with the fact that today was going to be a particular kind of day, and peace was better preparation for it than dread. Mia was still asleep. He had maybe 40 minutes before her alarm. He opened the article. The photograph was lobby footage, slightly grainy, the way security-adjacent images always were, but clear enough Isabella in the dark coat she'd been wearing the second Wednesday. Logan beside her, both of them waiting for the elevator. They weren't touching. They weren't even particularly close. But there was something in the geometry of the image, the way they stood, the angle of her head toward him, that told the story with the precision that good photographs always manage. The caption read, Vaughn days before her sudden resignation announcement with unidentified male companion. The article was everything Dre had predicted. Single father, Navy veteran, small security firm. The word mystery appeared 3 times. The phrase sources close to the board appeared twice. There was a quote from someone anonymous that used the word distraction in a way that was designed to be about Isabella without technically being about Isabella. Logan read it once. Then he closed it. He called Dre back. You've seen it, Dre said. Yes. You okay? Yes. Mia. Still asleep. I have about 30 minutes before that changes. What's your plan? Dre asked. I'm going to make her breakfast. I'm going to drive her to school. I'm going to come into the office and do the work that's on my desk. He paused. And I'm going to let Isabella handle her world the way she's equipped to handle it, because she's better at it than I am, and she doesn't need me to manage it for her. A long pause. That's very calm for a man whose face is about to be on every gossip site in the country. They don't have my face yet, Logan said. Just my silhouette. Give it 6 hours, Dre said. Then I'll deal with it in 6 hours. Another pause. Then Dre said without any of his usual irony, You love her. It wasn't a question. Logan looked at his coffee. Yeah, he said. I do. Okay, Dre said. For the second time in a week, just that. Okay, which from Dre was everything. His phone buzzed with a text from Isabella at 6:59. I saw it. I'm sorry. He texted back immediately. Don't be. Are you all right? Her response took 4 minutes. My father called at 6 a.m. We had the conversation. We should have had 20 years ago. I'll tell you about it later. I'm okay. Actually okay. Not performed okay. He read that twice. Then he typed, Good. Call me when you surface. Her response, Tonight. Come over. Bring Mia. He set the phone down on the table and sat with that for a moment. Then Mia's alarm went off down the hall, the sound of a 9-year-old's alarm, which she'd set to a song he didn't recognize, and that had a very aggressive opening, and the morning began. He didn't tell Mia about the article. He told himself it was because she didn't need the weight of it before school, which was true. He didn't examine too carefully the other part, which was that he wasn't entirely sure how to explain it yet, because explaining it meant explaining Isabella fully, and he'd been saving that explanation for a moment that felt right. He was beginning to suspect the moment was tonight. What he did do was make pancakes. Deliberately structurally unsound ones, thin, slightly crispy at the edges, exactly the kind she'd criticized at 4 years old. He did it on purpose. She came into the kitchen still pulling her hair into a ponytail, registered the pancakes, and gave him a suspicious look. "You're making the flat ones," she said. "I don't know what you mean." "Dad, you know what I mean." He put the plate in front of her. She sat down and looked at the pancakes, and then looked at him the way she did when she was reading a situation. She had always been able to read situations. He thought about what Isabella had said. She's going to run something someday. "Is something happening?" Mia asked. "Some things are changing," he said. "But they're changing in a good way. I'll tell you more tonight." She considered that with the serious, unhurried way she considered things. "Is it about your Wednesday friend?" "Yes." "Is she coming over?" "I thought maybe we'd go to her place," he said. "If that's okay with you." Mia picked up her fork. "Is she nice? For real this time? Not work friend nice?" "For real," he said. "She's the kind of nice that's hard, not the kind that's easy. She had to work at it. She's still working at it." Mia ate a piece of pancake. "I like people who work at things," she said with the authority of someone who had been working very hard on a secret novel for 6 months. "Is she going to be around for a while?" "That's the plan," Logan said. "But plans aren't promises. You know the difference." "Yeah." She ate another piece. "These are actually pretty good this way," she said, as if admitting it cost her something. "Don't tell me that. I need you to keep pushing me toward structural integrity." She grinned the full, unguarded grin that she didn't give everyone, the one that was her mother's shape and her own light, and he felt it in the center of his chest, the way he always felt that grin. Like confirmation that something in the world was properly aligned. He drove her to school. This time, when she walked through the front doors, the backpack too big and the ponytail slightly crooked, she turned back once and waved. He waved back. Then she was gone inside, and he sat in the drop-off line and breathed for a minute. Then he drove to work. By noon, they had his name. It wasn't surprising he'd known it was coming. Dre had known, anyone who understood how this machinery worked had known. But the specific feeling of seeing your own name in a headline was something you couldn't fully prepare for. Logan Pierce, 38. Navy veteran and single father, identified as mystery companion of Isabella Vaughn. There was a photo from his company website, Professional, a little stiff, and a photo of Mia's school that someone had found from a local news piece 2 years ago about the science fair. The school photo made his jaw tighten in a way the headline had not. He called the school, spoke to the principal, requested that no one discuss the article with Mia, and that her departure at the end of the day be through the side exit. The principal, a steady woman named Dr. Okafor, who had seen most things in 20 years of urban education, said, "Consider it handled, Mr. Pierce. She'll be fine." "Thank you," he said. He put the phone down, looked at his desk, picked up the work that was there and did it because that was what you did. You did the work. At 2 in the afternoon, Isabella called. "They found you," she said. "An hour ago," he said. "The school photo was a choice." "I know. I'm sorry. My team is—" "Isabella," he said. "Stop apologizing. You didn't take the photograph. You didn't run the article. You didn't choose this." "I chose you," she said, "which set this in motion." "Then I'd make the same choice," he said simply. "That's not a line. It's arithmetic." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "My father came to my apartment this morning." He sat up slightly. "In person." He flew in last night after he saw the article was coming. He was there at 7 a.m. A pause. We talked for 2 hours. Actually talked. He said things he's never said. I said things I've been saying only to you for the past 6 weeks. Another pause longer. He said he was afraid I was making the same mistake my mother made, choosing a person over a position. What did your mother choose? Logan asked carefully. She chose him, Isabella said, over her own career, over her own life. She made herself smaller to fit into his world, and she was brilliant, and she disappeared inside it. A beat. That's what he's been afraid of for me, his entire life. He pushed me so hard to be untouchable because he couldn't stand the thought of me disappearing the way she did. Logan was quiet for a moment, absorbing the architecture of that, the specific way a parent's fear weaponized by love can become the thing that most damages the person they're trying to protect. What did you tell him? He asked. I told him I wasn't my mother, Isabella said. And Logan isn't him. And that the reason I was finally able to step back and make a real choice about my own life was because for the first time, I had something in it that wasn't about proving anything. She paused. He cried. My father cried. I have seen that man in front of Senate subcommittees and hostile boards and hostile press, and I have never seen him cry. What did you do? I hugged him, she said simply. For the first time in probably 15 years. He's smaller than I remembered. Isn't that something you stop letting people be human for long enough and you forget they're small? Logan sat with that. How do you feel? Wrecked, she said. Good wrecked. Like something that needed to break finally did, and now there's room. A pause. Bring Mia. Tonight. I want to make my mother's pasta, and I want to meet the girl who writes books, and I want tonight to be a real night, not a careful one. We'll be there at 6, he said. Logan. Yeah. Thank you, she said. For every Wednesday, for the protein bar, for all of it. Thank you for saying my name like you meant it, he said, from the beginning. He picked Mia up from the side exit at 3:15. Dr. Okafor had been as good as her word. Mia was unruffled backpack on, carrying a permission slip for a field trip that needed signing. She got in the car and handed him the permission slip before her seatbelt was buckled, and for a moment, it was just an ordinary Tuesday afternoon pickup, unremarkable and familiar and quietly precious in the way ordinary things become when you understand how quickly they move. Good day, he asked. Tyler Chen said something about the article. She said matter of fact. He looked at her in the rearview mirror. What did Tyler Chen say? He said you were famous. She put her backpack on her lap. I told him you were just a person. She paused. He said that wasn't what famous meant. I said I knew what famous meant, and that's why I said just a person. She paused again. Mrs. Okafor heard and said I was very mature. You are very mature, he said. I know. It's exhausting. She looked out the window. Are we going to her place tonight? The Wednesday friend. We are, he said. Her name is Isabella. She's making pasta. Mia was quiet for a moment. Then, does she know I know she exists? She does, Logan said. I told her what you said, about some things you tell people yourself. A pause. He watched Mia's expression in the mirror, that interior processing look, the one that meant she was taking something seriously. Did she think that was smart? Mia asked. She thought it was one of the smartest things she'd heard, he said. Mia considered this with satisfaction. Good, she said. Then, is she nervous about meeting me? He thought about the honest answer. Yes, he said. She is. Mia nodded slowly. I'll be nice, she said. Not easy nice, real nice. He gripped the steering wheel and said nothing, because sometimes what you feel for a person is too large for words, and trying to put it into them does it a disservice. Deal, he said finally. Isabella had set the table. Not formally, not the precision of performance she was capable of, but actually set it with the everyday plates she'd bought when she moved in and rarely used because eating alone at a table felt like a statement she wasn't ready to make. She'd put a small plant in the center that she'd bought that afternoon from a corner market. The plant was slightly lopsided. She'd bought it because it was slightly lopsided because suddenly she had opinions about which imperfect things to keep. She heard the elevator and her hands did something she didn't expect them to do, which was shake. Slightly. She pressed them flat against the counter and took a breath. The doors opened. Logan stepped out first. Behind him, a 9-year-old with a crooked ponytail and a backpack that was slightly too big for her frame and eyes that were doing what his eyes did. Reading the room, taking precise inventory, missing nothing. They looked at each other. "Hi," Isabella said. "Hi," Mia said. A beat. "You're shorter than I thought," Mia said. "Mia," Logan said. "It's not an insult," Mia said, patient. "I just thought from what Dad said you'd be taller. People who run companies are usually depicted taller in movies." Isabella felt something in her chest loosen. "I'm 5'4", she said. "I've never run a movie." Mia considered this. "That's fair," she said. She looked around the apartment with the frank curiosity of a child who hadn't learned to pretend not to notice things. "This is a very clean apartment." "I know," Isabella said. "I'm working on it. Working on making it less clean." "Working on making it more lived in," Isabella said. "There's a difference." Mia looked at the slightly lopsided plant, then at Isabella. "Did you buy that today?" "Yes." "For tonight?" "Yes." Mia walked to the counter and looked at the plant up close. Then she looked back at Isabella with the assessment of someone who has made a decision. "I like it," she said. "We should name it." Isabella blinked. "Name it. Plants do better when they have names. I read that." She looked at the plant. "It looks like a Gerald." Logan behind her pressed his lips together. Isabella looked at him once. He gave her nothing, just a slight widening of the eyes that meant, "This is what she's like, welcome." "Gerald," Isabella said. "I think that's exactly right." Mia nodded, satisfied. She set her backpack against the wall with the specific deliberateness of someone making themselves comfortable in a space, and then she looked at Isabella again with those clear, taking inventory eyes. "Dad says you make good pasta," she said. "My mother's recipe," Isabella said. "She was very strict about the sauce." "What was she strict about?" "The time. You have to let it go slow. She said you can't rush the sauce or it tastes like you were in a hurry, and food should never taste like you were in a hurry." Mia thought about this with great seriousness. "That's a good rule," she said. "Can I watch? I'm learning to cook. Dad's teaching me, but he mostly knows breakfast food." "Breakfast food is foundational," Logan said mildly. "You can absolutely watch," Isabella said. "You can help if you want. There's chopping." "I'm good at chopping," Mia said, already moving toward the kitchen with the confidence of someone who had decided this place was acceptable and was now prepared to participate in it. "Dad taught me. He says the knife does the work, you just direct it." "That's correct," Isabella said, following her. "That's exactly correct." Logan stood at the edge of the kitchen and watched the two of them, his daughter pulling a stool to the counter without being asked. Isabella adjusting the cutting board to account for her height with the careful attention of someone who understood that details were how you showed people they were seen. He stood there and felt something move through him that he recognized from very few other moments in his life. The specific feeling of something being right. Not perfect. Right. The feeling that the space a thing was supposed to occupy was finally occupied. He moved into the kitchen and stood beside them. "What do I do?" Isabella pointed at the stove. "You watch the heat. It has a tendency to go too high." "I'm good at watching," he said. "You really are," she said. She said it quietly enough that Mia didn't catch it, but he did. He caught the edge of a smile with it. "Gerald needs water," Mia said, without looking up from the mushrooms she was chopping with extreme concentration. "I'll do it after dinner," Isabella said. "He might be thirsty now." "Gerald will persevere," Logan said. Mia considered. Fair, she said, and kept chopping. They ate at the table. All three of them at the table Isabella had set with the everyday plates and the lopsided plant named Gerald in the center. The pasta was as it always was, exactly right, the sauce slow and unhurried, tasting the way her mother had intended it to taste. Mia ate with the straightforward enthusiasm of a child who encountered good food and responded to it honestly. She asked Isabella 11 questions during dinner. Logan counted on topics ranging from whether she'd ever been on a private plane, yes, whether she missed being CEO. It's complicated, which Mia accepted as a real answer, whether she thought dragons could realistically be kept in a basement without the ventilation system giving it away. This one stopped Isabella for a full 3 seconds, and whether Gerald was a he or she, or neither. I think Gerald is a Gerald, Isabella said. Some things are their own category. Mia pointed her fork. That's a good answer, she said with the authority of a judge reaching a verdict. After dinner, Mia asked to see the rest of the apartment, and Isabella showed her not a tour, just walking through, while Mia asked questions, and touched things carefully, and made small observations in the frank, precise way she made all observations. In the room Isabella had been slowly converting from a spare office into something that looked like it might become a reading room. Mia stopped. Are you going to put books in here? She asked. I think so, Isabella said. You should, Mia said. Every room needs at least one book, or it's just storage. She looked at the empty shelves. I could help you pick some. I have opinions about books. I've noticed you have opinions about most things, Isabella said. Is that bad? No, Isabella said. It's the best possible thing. Mia looked at her directly for a moment, the direct, full attention look that was Logan's look, but with its own quality, younger, less weathered, more open. Dad's happy, Mia said. He doesn't always show it a lot because he thinks he needs to be the steady one. But I can tell. He's been different on Wednesdays. Isabella was quiet for a moment. Different how? He hums, Mia said simply. When he's cooking. He used to hum when I was little, and then he stopped for a while. He's doing it again. Isabella felt the weight of that sit in her chest, the image of Logan Pierce, who had survived Fallujah, and 7 years of carrying everything alone, humming while he cooked dinner before going to see her. The casual, unconscious evidence of a person beginning to be all right. I'm happy too, Isabella said. I'm not always good at showing it either. I know, Mia said. But you're working on it. She looked at Gerald across the room through the doorway. Like the apartment. Like the apartment, Isabella agreed. Mia nodded. Decision made. Jury returned. Okay, she said. Then she went back to the living room where Logan was washing the dinner dishes, because he'd started doing that weeks ago and hadn't stopped, and she sat on the couch that had started being used, and pulled out the field trip permission slip that still needed signing. Isabella stood in the doorway of the almost reading room and watched Logan dry a dish and hand the pen from the counter to Mia without her asking for it, and sign the form she held up to him without looking at it, because he trusted her to hand him the right form, and she thought, this is what it looks like. This is what the thing I was afraid of not being enough for actually looks like. Not a performance, not a version, just this. She walked back into the kitchen and stood beside him. Gerald needs water, she said. I know, he said. I'll do it. I'll do it, she said. It's my plant. He handed her the glass from the dish rack. She took it, filled it, walked it to Gerald's lopsided self on the counter, and poured water carefully at the base. There, she said. There, he agreed. They drove home at 8:30. Logan buckled Mia in the back, then came around to the driver's side, and Isabella stood in the building's entrance because she'd walked them down another thing she hadn't done before, always staying at the elevator, always at the managed remove of a proper farewell. Tonight, she'd come down. Thank you, Logan said. You keep saying that, she said. You keep earning it, he said. She looked at him in the amber glow of the streetlight, the man who had moved when no one else did, who had kept her off a marble floor and handed her a protein bar and listened to her like the conversation was actually about something. The man who hummed while he cooked. The man who had driven to her building every Wednesday for 6 weeks and never once asked her to be anything other than what she was. "I'll call you tomorrow," she said. "I'll be there," he said. "I know." She took a small step back toward the door. "Logan, I'm not afraid anymore." He looked at her for a moment. "Of what specifically?" "Of being found wanting," she said. "I thought you should know that it passed." He nodded slowly. "What replaced it?" She thought about it honestly. "Something better," she said. "Something I don't have a word for yet, but better." He got in the truck. She watched him pull out of the parking space, watched the taillights move into the flow of the street, watched until they were gone. Then she went back upstairs. The apartment was the same apartment it had always been, but it held now the specific warmth that a space acquires when it has been fully inhabited. Dishes draining in the rack. A permission slip left on the counter. Gerald watered and slightly less lopsided because Mia had quietly adjusted the pot when no one was looking. She sat on the couch. Her couch that she sat on now. She thought about her mother, who had made the sauce slow because food should never taste like you were in a hurry. She thought about her father, smaller than she'd remembered, crying in her apartment that morning for the first time she'd ever witnessed. She thought about a protein bar on a staff lounge couch, and a card she'd pressed into the hands of a stranger, and 4 words she'd sent at 10 o'clock at night. Same time next week. She looked at Gerald. Gerald did not offer commentary. Outside, the city moved through its night. The same city that had watched her be untouchable for a decade, that had photographed her in lobbies and speculated about her choices and reduced her to headlines and positions and net worth. The city that had no idea and never would what had actually happened. What had quietly, completely, irreversibly happened. A woman had fallen not on a marble floor, but into something far more terrifying and far more real. And a man who understood the difference between what people should do and what they actually do had moved when no one else did. That was the whole story. The rest was just the living of it. And Isabella Vaughn, who had spent 10 years being untouchable, and had learned in 6 weeks and 5 Wednesdays and 1 lopsided plant named Gerald that untouchable was just another word for alone, was finally fully and without apology ready to live it.